welcome. Today is Monday, January 8th, 2024. Alastair Crooke joins us now. Alastair, always a pleasure, my dear friend. Welcome back to the show. You have a very interesting piece. It's either out now or it's about to come out, arguing about the attitude that the West has towards the rest of the world and how that attitude will largely be its undoing. Does the West, by and large, believe that it is exceptional? Does the West think it is morally superior to, let's say, the Russians?
No, this is the problem. I think that we've come to the conclusion very clearly that that period where, the vision of the West, which has been a long-running one of sort of our superiority, our inherent superiority, as I put it, from Plato to NATO, is no longer believed by the rest of the world. They no longer believe that we have some special qualities, that our culture is unique and suitable for everyone. And this is why I think we're sort of desperate, because, of course, our hegemony has been built on this myth. Our hegemony, and I'm afraid to say also our colonial world, was based on the idea that somehow the West had an innate superiority about how to do things, about technology, and about its culture. And that has come to an end or is fading. And we can feel it. We're past that. It's going. I mean, this is what the multipolar world is all about. And why people say, we don't want to, we just don't want to necessarily do things the way the West does. So that's gone. Yes, it's gone.
You're getting a lot of kudos from the people watching us now who write in their thoughts. From Plato to NATO, that's genius. So it's a very catchy line. And of course, it's more than just a line that rhymes. It encapsulates the view that you're trying to articulate. I mean, for years, the United States had this motto of manifest destiny. We bought land from the French, and we seized it from the Spaniards, and we seized it from the Native Americans because we were white, we were Western, we were Christian. We had the right to dominate. Do the elites, I guess they do, Alastair, do the elites still believe that?
No. Consequently, this is the cause of their fear. They're very frightened because of the whole of the structure of the rules-based order is based on basically Western philosophy, Western ideology, Western financial systems, and Western idea of democracy. And so it's all been based on that. And this is why I think there's been such fear about what was happening in Russia and what has been happening in Ukraine, the sense that everything could come down, that the whole structure, the whole, if you like, the whole paradigm could start to fragment and break up, and we'd no longer be able to maintain our sort of privileged position in the world, as Putin calls it, our exorbitant privilege any longer, once the world stops believing that somehow the Western way is the only way. The end of time. Fukuyama's book about how everything was going to converge on Western liberalism. Well, no one believes that now. It's gone, and people are very are very frightened by that. And this is why they come up with these narratives, to try and keep that sort of hegemony aloft, to keep it going somehow in the future. And so they want to produce these narratives about how the West is always winning, that the West has the winning narrative, that it has the one that everyone wants. But of course, sometimes facts, like in Ukraine, like what's happening in Israel, actually just overthrow completely that narrative. They're just unsustainable because after a time, facts on the ground, facts on the battlefield, facts from videos and from alternative media show that this is totally wrong. But we've been stuck with the idea of having one narrative, the winning narrative, and everyone else having a clunky narrative and not such a good narrative. And that's what we hope will sort of substitute for this fading of Western culture, fading of the Western idea, fading of the Western vision.
So is the neocon a disaster in Ukraine one last gasp to extend Western ideology and bloody the Russian nose?
Well, it was, yes, it was that. It was very much about it. I mean, you remember people were saying at the outset of the war, if Russia wins this war, the West is finished. We're over. It's done with. So, yes, it was thought to be an easy win that particularly the financial sanctions, the sanctions on Russia. You remember the French finance minister was crowing at the time that this would collapse Russia within weeks or days, he said, and that the ruble would be, this was Biden's word, would be rubble, and that it would collapse, and that then it would be easy for Ukraine to have a victory, and that then the Western narrative would be sustained, reinforced. The Western narrative of being a winner would be reinforced and improved. So they stuck to this. The only problem is that trying to enforce those narratives, trying to keep to those narratives, means either you have to turn everyone else's into sort of Manichaean, like Putin, the figure of hate, the figure of Satan, whatever else, which has the disadvantage of two things. One, you never hear what they're saying. We don't listen anymore to anyone else because we're so intent in keeping our narratives at the forefront of everyone's thoughts that we don't listen to what Russia, what China, what Iran is saying anymore. We have no empathy. We have no ability to understand what's going on or what they're thinking because we insist on our narrative and we exclude the narrative of anyone else. It's finished. No, that's all lies.
Statistically, the Russian economy is in better shape now than before the sanctions were imposed, notwithstanding the enormous expense of the special military operation in Ukraine. Statistically, we all know that the Ukraine war is virtually over, even though the Congress of the United States is making noises now that if Joe Biden goes along with certain domestic issues having to do with immigration and a wall to retard the flow of immigrants in the Southwest, that the Congress may come up with another 60 or 70 billion for Ukraine. Do the elites, do the neocons still see a glimmer of hope that they can pull this rabbit out of a hat, or do even they recognize that Ukraine is over, that it was a disaster, that the values behind it, which you've just been critically describing, no longer subsist, and it's time to focus their attention elsewhere?
Yes, they recognize. I'm certain of that now. They recognize this war is over, and what's more, they don't believe that it can be resumed. And all we're doing now, and all we're seeing, is ways of trying to create a narrative that the West has won. Again, that the West has won because Putin has failed. He didn't take Kiev. He didn't capture the whole country, and they impute that as a fact that this is what Putin was seeking. Whereas we know very clearly, and was later demonstrated, that what he was doing when the troops went near Kiev was to try and sort of push people towards a negotiation. And then the negotiation happened, if you remember, in March of last year, the previous year. And of course, Britain and America told Zelensky and Kiev, forget it, just keep the war going. So they want to, if you like, let down, find a narrative that says, we still won. But it's not going to work because Russia isn't going to play with that narrative. It's not going to negotiate the stalemate as they hope. Russia will negotiate, yes, but only one thing. They want capitulation. They expect capitulation and the removal of, if you like, the neo-Nazi elements from the regime. So it's not going to happen. But they're still scrabbling around, and they can't go on long, because what they are resorting to now is simply firing long-range missiles into civil Russia, into civilian cities of Russia. And there's this isn't a military operation any longer. This is terrorism. And even the United States is not going to be able to go on very long with just simply firing lots of rockets into Belgorod in Russia, and to killing lots of civilians going out doing their Christmas shopping. So I don't think it can last.
How dangerous is it for world stability that the munitions being fired at Russian civilians were manufactured in the United States?
Well, probably the last ones were manufactured in the Czech Republic, but it's the same thing that we're seeing in Gaza. It makes one complicit, and Gaza is shining a very clear light on the whole of the war on Ukraine. The attacks now by Ukraine on civilians living in Russia, inside 91 Russia. I mean, nothing to do with the Ukraine, attacking civilians, causing many deaths, I mean, is unacceptable. It is a war crime. And the states that are supplying the long-range missiles for that, therefore, are complicit in a war crime against Russia. And Ukraine is making this point very clearly, and the recent ICW action about genocide also underlines the point about criminal action against a collective population.
At the risk of drawing you into domestic American politics, which I don't want to do, but I have to ask you this: What will the neocons and the Biden administration claim as their off-ramp? Will they say something like, "Oh, it's a stalemate. He didn't get Kyiv. He didn't go as far west as he wanted"? I mean, what can they say to make themselves save face?
That's all. I mean, the lines on the front are the Ukrainians have gone into complete defensive posture, and Russia is attacking everywhere, strongly, accelerating fashion across all the lines, and it's also mounting a reaction to these attacks on its civilian population across Kiev and across Ukraine with masses of missiles and drones, but focused on military targets, on air defenses, on factories, not on civilian populations.
Why do nation states talk past each other, or why do they not even talk to each other anymore? Why is it that Foreign Minister Lavrov and Secretary of State Blinken don't pick up the phone and speak with each other?
Well, because of this insistence in the West in this period that we have the winning, and we've got to stick with the winning narrative. And it's got to be from top to bottom of our society. And mass media is to enforce it and to denigrate anyone that tries to step out of line with that single mantra, the single narrative of the future. And so whenever we have the attempt at a discussion, you have the foreign minister, or you have whoever is involved with it, the interviewer has to insist on the Western narrative, which was that Russia invaded innocent Ukraine in an aggression without provocation and illegally. Now, that just robs everything of its context. It just sort of tries to isolate it and try and use it as a narrative. But when you do that, then you can't engage in a proper discussion with the other side. You can't listen, because you're always having to put forward and insist that this is the narrative. This is the truth, the one truth that exists.